class. So let me go ahead and do that right away. So there you go. Now this one contains some, I've sent it in the chat. Professor, I believe you got the document as well, Professor. So that did you get the file? Yeah, there you go. So that's a PDF file, guys. Students, so please may download it, because once the class is over, I don't know if you can still download. I don't think Zoom chat stay alive. So please download the document right away and go through it. And it contains essential links about external references and stuff like that. Now, moving on from there. So the very first question in programming is, what are these variables? What are these data types, or we just call them types, and how do we go ahead and create them, and so on. Okay, now obviously I've been talking about variables for 20 plus years now. So I'm like 40 now, so I've been coding since I was 15. So this is like something which comes up every time I start a new batch of training. Here I want to use an example of a container. Okay, so let me just get my drawing pen here. So suppose you want to store something. Okay, so let's say I'm traveling, all right, and I would like to, I don't know if on the way I'm going by a bus, so it's not like a train or something where, usually in a train in India, we have water taps and, restrooms and everything. So in a train, it's not a problem. But in a bus, no, no such thing. No, no, none of those facilities. So you got to carry your own water bottle. So let's say I want to carry water bottles. I don't want to be thirsty. So I'll carry a container, like a water bottle, and then I'll go ahead and fill it up with water, and then I'll use it with me. Fine. But what if I want to go ahead and I'm carrying with me, suppose it's summertime, and I want to make sure that I'm carrying with me like cold water. So what I would have to do is I'd probably have to buy one of those thermos containers. Professor, do you know what I'm talking about, sir? Like, you get these steel, water bottles where, if you put something hot, it remains hot. If you put something cold, it, I think you know what, there you go. Yes,
Like
Professor.
a
Yeah,
thermos?
okay. Yeah, exactly, Professor. A thermos water bottle, right? So that is, again, you use it to store cold water or hot water, depending on the weather and so on. Or what if I'm carrying something like maybe cooking oil? I don't know why I'm carrying cooking oil in the bus, but let's just assume for some reason I'm carrying cooking oil. Then I'll probably go ahead and purchase a water bottle which has the capacity to hold the cooking oil. So what I'm doing here is, depending on what I am trying to do, I carry or obtain the right material to store that specific type of item. So if I'm just carrying a water bottle, like just regular water, then I can use like a plastic water bottle, probably a disposable bottle, which I'll put in the recycle bin or something. Okay. Now, let's say if it is summer, then I want to carry with me like cold water, then I'll probably use a thermos type water bottle so I can put some ice in it, and so it'll stay cold for another 2 3 hours or something. If it is winter, I'll use the same thermos water bottle with hot water in it. Or if I'm carrying like oil for some reason, I'll use a oil specific container. So in each case, I'm trying to store something. So if you're going to be a programmer, you have to start visualizing these things. So depending on what you're trying to do, you're using the appropriate type. That's the connection I'm trying to make here. Depending on the type of liquid that you're trying to carry, you use a specific type of container. Does that make sense to you, Professor? Depending on what you're trying to carry, you use a specific type of container. Does that make sense, Professor?
Yes. It's like if
Okay.
you're carrying water, you want to have something where the water's not going to leak out.
Yeah,
But
exactly, Professor.
if you're carrying rocks, you can have holes in your bucket, for example.
That's fine. You can even carry it in a bag or something. There you go, Professor. So if for
Yeah.
some reason I'm traveling by bus, I'm carrying a bag of rocks, then I could just use a bag, of any kind, or even a a big box or a luggage carrier for some reason. So,
And if you have
so
glasses, sometimes you want to put your glasses in a hard case to protect the glasses.
yes, exactly, Professor. Like, like for example, Professor, when I'm traveling, like what I do is my tablets and all, either I buy a case which has like a cushioning in it, so that when the back when the bus or whatever bounces something, my phone and my tablet is safe. So again, depending on the thing, we have a different type of container. So coming back to programming, my dear students, so the connection I'm trying to make here is in programming, ultimately we are trying to get some kind of a problem solved using the programming language. A very simple example, something we'll do today is, suppose I'm trying to do some basic math operations. I'm just trying to add two numbers, right? So that means I need to go ahead, and first step is, so I got to get a box. So let's say I'm trying to add 5 and then 5. Now, before I can do this add operation, I have to figure out a way to store 5 in a box. And then I have a second 5. So I'm going to go ahead and get a box for that too. And I'll put 5 in it. And then I'll use what is called as an operator. We'll talk about operators probably in the next session, but we'll not get into that today. So I will use the addition operator, and I'll go ahead and combine 5 plus 5, and then obviously I'm going to get the result as 10, which also gets stored in a box of its own. So this is what we do in programming. Now, these boxes which are storing, okay, these boxes which are storing these numbers, they are called variables. So I am trying to add two numbers. So I will go ahead and create two boxes and then a third box, which is for storing the result. Now the name for these boxes is going to be variables. So that's what variables is. And you'll hear about these variables for the rest of your programming life. Every time we do something, we go ahead and create a variable. Now, moving on from variables, a little bit more theory about data types and types, and a little bit more about these things. And then, of course, we'll go ahead and start doing some coding, right? Now, what are these data types or just types? But for the sake of this session, I'll use the full word data type. Now, as the name implies, data type is literally the type of data you're trying to store. Once again, for the purpose of this class, we'll look at these simple types. So these very simple types are whole numbers or integers, like for example, a number of people in a room. So that's usually 5 people or 10 people, so on and so forth. That's a whole number. We call that an integer, or just int for short. Now, let's say we are talking about temperature. Now, temperature is not always a whole number. Like right now, I look at my city, the temperature is somewhere about 21.2 degree centigrade. Now, so it's India, so we use degrees here. So 21.2 degrees. So that is like a floating number or a decimal number. Now, what about my name or Professor Lambert's name? So Dr. Lambert's name, that's going to be what is called as a string type. Now, if you have a single character, that is called as a char. So if I have a single character like Professor Lambert, again, L, so that's going to be a single character called L. And finally, the fifth basic data type is obviously a Boolean. Again, Boolean is something which is either true or false. So these are the basic types you will encounter when you're programming. Now, there are obviously more types, okay, but we'll leave that to future sessions. But for this class, again, today, when I practice, I'll show you integers, I'll show you some floating or decimal values, I'll show you some string values, string data types, and I'll show you some single character and Boolean values. So these are the values we'll be looking at today. And finally, how do we create variables in programming? You'll see the demo in a minute or so, but first, let's look at these three different ways to create variables. Okay, so first we have, now these things are called keywords. Okay, again, I hope you are making notes as I am speaking, and obviously when you watch the recording, hope you're practicing it as well, what I'll do today. So we have three ways to create variables in JavaScript. We have something called var. These are keywords. Keywords means in programming, these are words which are reserved. That means you can't use it for any purpose. You have to use it for that specific purpose. For example, like I'm speaking to you, you're able to hear me and I'm able to hear you because of these headphones. Now, when you get angry, if you want to, you can use the headphone to throw at somebody, but that's not what a headphone is designed for. So similarly, you have the var, let, and constant. These things are keywords, and you're supposed to use them for creating different types of variables. So we have var, which is like the older way of doing creating variables. We have let, which is a more newish kind of way of creating variables. And finally, whenever we are creating constant values, we use the const keyword. Now, there is some difference between each of them. For example, the const keyword allows you to create constants, which means once you create a variable that is constant, you cannot change the value at all. It is fixed. That's about it. However, when you create variables with var and let, then you can actually change values, and you are actually expected to change the value as your programming proceeds. Professor, I don't know if you're able to hear some disturbance, Professor. We have a festival in India this week. So are you hearing anything like that?
Yeah, we hear something in the background, but
Let
we
me
can't
close the
we
door.
can't tell what it is.
Okay,
It's
let
not
me close the window, Professor. Just 1 minute.
we can still hear you perfectly.
I'll just close the window, Professor. So we have like a very big festival, Professor, called Diwali. You may have heard about it in India. So this is the month of Diwali. So some neighbors are having a festival time. Okay, all right, back in the coding thing. So these are the main things, folks. This is what I want to show you in today's session. So I'm going to jump into it, and if I finish this and there's still some time, I will get into functions as well. If I don't have any time today, then I'll push methods and functions to the next session. Now, before I get into this, I do want to spend a few minutes about AI, Professor, because as I mentioned before, AI has become very much a part of developer life. There is no escaping it whatsoever. And you'll see me using AI in all the sessions, not because I'm lazy, but because I've reached a point where I have to accept and embrace AI. It's not going away, it's going to be part of it, especially for coding. It's going to be part of our lives. So I'm going to be using AI during the session, so you know how to use it as well. But first thing first, so how do we go ahead and practice then? Now, I already shown this in the previous sessions. I hope you have installed all the developer tools and stuff like that. So let's jump into it. So first step, let's go ahead. Let me come out of this PowerPoint for a second. Let me minimize this. Hold on. Okay, as always, I already have a folder called AIU practice, but I want to show you guys how to create a new folder. It's a very simple step, but I'll do it anyway. So AIU practice. Okay, so there you go. And I will go inside this folder. And as we have discussed in the previous sessions, I'm going to right click, show more options, and I'll go and open VS Code. So there you go, my dear students. Now here, next thing is you go to your extensions. Please make sure that you have installed an extension called, I hope I'm saying it correctly, Coca. So just make a note of it. Let me see if there's a link that I can share to you in the, hold on, yeah, there it is. Okay, I'm going to put this link in the chat box, Professor. So students, please make a copy of this link. This is the extension. If you don't already have it, it's there on the screen as well. Just search for it in Visual Studio and make sure that you have installed it in your Visual Studio. So make sure you have that, right? Okay, then. So next thing is, now how do you practice JavaScript? How do you run this Coca thing? Why do we use it? So there are many ways to run JavaScript, which again have been dealt with in the previous sessions. So we are using Coca. Using it is simple. Just go ahead and right click in the gray area on the left side. Let's create a file called practice. Today it's October 25, 2024.js. We are practicing JavaScript. So we are going to create a file called .js, which is the extension for the JavaScript file. And there you go. So you have a file here. Okay, once again, make sure you have the Coca extension. Make sure you create a folder, right click, show more options, open with VS Code. Come here, right click on the gray area, new file, create the file, and have this ready. Next thing is I have to activate. I have to activate the Coca extension. So I'll go here on the top. I'm going to slow down a little bit here because it might be a little bit tricky for first time users. You have something called command palette on the top. So we are in a coding session now. So you'll see that there are a lot of menus and they look really, really small. I'm sorry about it. If you're on a mobile connection, if you're watching me on a mobile phone, it's not going to work out. You've got to get a computer and hopefully you're on a PC or something. So on the top, you have something called view, and then you have something called command palette. And here you should automatically see Coca as the first option. If you don't see it, just search for Quokka and you'll see all the Coca options in the top. What we want is the very first option, which is Coca start on current file. Now here I want to pause for a second. Professor, were my instructions clear enough, sir? I want to make sure, because if you are able to follow along, everybody else is able to follow along, is what I am thinking. Okay, professor is nodding. Okay, all right, so there we go. Okay, all right, guys. So now, if everything is went as planned, okay, now you'll see in the bottom, there's a nice green color. The color might be different for you, but there'll be a nice message that says Coca and the file name. So you should see that. But once you see it, we are in business.
If you can just hold down your control key and kind of scroll to make it a little bit bigger.
Yes, professor. I will make this one bigger. Let me see, professor. I have
if
to
you
go
just
to
hold
the
down
Zoom.
your control key and then scroll, you can make your screen bigger or larger.
Professor, it doesn't work on VS Code though. So I'll have to
Okay.
make it bigger in another way, professor. I know what you're talking about, professor. Let me just zoom in here. So there you go, professor. Is
there you go.
Yes, professor. Let me make it a little bit more as well. Professor, is this okay?
There you go.
Okay, all right, professor. Okay, very good. Okay, so there you go, guys. You should have this much. Now I'm kind of slowing down and repeating it. I know there are some students who are like, why is this guy repeating this so many times? Like, this is the first step. If you can't figure this out, then you can't follow along in any of this session and the future sessions as well. So again, repeating myself, there you go. Have this running. Now let's go ahead. Now, what are we doing here? If I go back to my PowerPoint, my first step is to show you how to create different types of variables. So let's do that. So there are three ways of doing it: var, let, const. Let's use all of them. So I'm going to go back to my VS Code and I'm going to say var. There you go. You know, as you're typing, a lot of things will happen. Slow down, read the messages, see what's happening. So I'm going to say var, and I'm going to create a variable called Professor Lambert because I like Professor Lambert. So I'm going to say Lambert prof, right? There we go. And here I'm going to just add a number here. So I'm going to say equals 10. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to show this value on the screen. So I'm going to use something called console.log. Please remember that we'll be using console.log a lot. Here I'm going to say Lambert prof. And you'll see in the bottom, professor, it says Professor Lambert is 10. So that's a very simple usage of variables. So line number one, line numbers are important in programming. When I'm talking, I'm always refer to line numbers. So focus on that. Line number one, I am creating a variable. Now, if I want to, I can add a comment. So I'm going to say // comments are pieces of code which don't get executed. So that is useful for documentation. I will have more to say about documentation as the sessions progress. So for now, I want to add a comment like, okay, here I am creating a variable called Lambert professor. There we go. And what I have done, I have assigned, okay, guys, the word is assigned. And this is called assigned a value of 10. And for the purpose of assignment, I'm using what is called as assignment operator. So it's a very simple piece of code, but so much is happening. On the left side, I'm using the var keyword. Then I'm giving it a variable name. So the variable is called Lambert prof. And I'm using the assignment operator and assigning the value 10. And finally, what I'm doing here is I'm using the console.log. We call this caveman debugging. Okay. So caveman debugging, very useful when you're practicing. Caveman debugging means whatever it is that you're trying to do, you go ahead and put it out there using console log. Very useful for beginners. I use it in all my classes. In fact, even today, I'm working on a couple of projects for my clients. I use caveman debugging even now. It does slow me down a little bit. It does cost you an extra 30 seconds of coding, an extra minute of coding, but for me it is worth it because it gives me very good results, helps me avoid errors, and gives solid results. Okay, so all good reasons to use caveman debugging. And then what I'm doing is I just want to show the value, and you can see here whatever value I put here, it's becoming visible here, and it's also visible on the bottom. Now if I go back to the top and I go and make it 20, the output changes to 20 immediately. So this is the water bottle situation. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a container, a storage box called Lambert Professor. And in that container, just like the water bottle situation or the bag of stones, or the case where I put my iPad or something when I'm traveling, I am creating a container called Lambert Professor. And then in that container, I am storing, right to left. Like, remember, this guy is very important in programming. Some people get confused by this. In programming, everything moves from right to left. Always be reading from right to left. Okay, so I've seen a lot of students get confused by this. So I'm typing from left to right, but all the operations happen from right to left. I cannot emphasize this enough. I've seen many students struggle with this. You don't want to be one of them. So from day one, you type the code left to right, obviously, but then you read the code right to left. Okay, let's not forget that. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a variable on the left side, assigning a value on the right side, and that value I'm going ahead and showing on the screen. Now let's quickly go ahead and do the same thing using a const keyword, because const can also be used to create variables. But why though? If they're both doing the same thing, what is the difference? Let's find out. So let me come back from here. I'm going to say const, and I'm going to say tutor J. I'm going to create a variable. You can give any name you want, no problem. And I'm going to call this one 30. And here I'm going to say const, not const, sorry. I want to use let. We'll come to const later. So I'm going to say let tutor J. So once again, I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to say tutor J. And you'll see, right? Just like here, I put 20. I don't want to be more than Professor Lambert. So I'm going to make my value 15. There you go. So there you go. So tutor J is 15, and I'm using the let thing. So far, both var and let are doing the same thing. Now, what is the difference though? Let's find out. Now, I can come back here. Okay, now observe this, and I can say var Lambert Professor is equal to 40. And I can once again say console.log Lambert Professor, and I'll get 40. So far, so good. But wait a second though, I already created this storage box here. Why am I creating it again? Now that is a problem, okay? But if I use let, now see what happens. I go here and I'm gonna say let tutor J is equal to 25. You see that I'm getting a red error, and it says identifier tutor J has already been declared, which means I'm getting a warning. The computer is trying to tell me, hey, you know what? You already have tutor J created here in line number 9. You can't create that again. Now, obviously, in programming, you have to have things that are unique. Otherwise, they will create problems. So that is the difference between var and let. Now, var, as I mentioned before, is a kind of old school. It's from the early days of JavaScript, where it doesn't care. Like I already have Professor Lambert here in line number 4, and it doesn't care that I'm creating the same thing once more. Okay, so it won't give me an error. However, when I use the modern, more recent let option, I do get an error saying that, you know what, you have already created this variable before, stop recreating it. So if I want to use it again, I just have to use it. Or I can use a different name. I can call this tutor J2. Now, why is this important though? Because why can't I just use the new stuff? Why can't I just use let all the time? The problem is when you go online. See, the whole learning of programming is ultimately comes down to looking at courses, looking at online workshops, looking at online YouTube tutorials, buying courses, free courses, paid courses, attending classes. That's how you learn programming. And because, a lot of people still use war. Even, I mean, I, for example, use war all the time. So you shouldn't get confused when you look at a piece of code online, or even when I'm teaching. I might use war and suddenly I might start using let. Because it doesn't make much of a difference to me. So it's important to know what is where and why. So if somebody online is using war, it doesn't make it wrong. If somebody online is using let, it doesn't make it right though. However, as a general policy, you should make it a habit to use let as much as possible, because it is a good thing though. I don't want to be creating variables which have the same name twice. So that is the difference and similarities between war and let. So personal preference, yeah, use let wherever you can, but don't be surprised if a lot of people, if you're working in a team or something, are using war, or online when you go, you see war being used many times. So let's move on to the next one. This is the last one really, is const. So const is a constant. So I can say const, and here I'm just going to say Batman. Const Batman is equal to 4. Okay. Now again, I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to say Batman. So now you see 4. You can see in the bottom as well, and you can see here also the output is being displayed. Now the const thing means you cannot change it. So if I come back here and try to say Batman is equal to 10, I will get a error. See, it says I'm trying to assign to a constant variable, so I cannot change it. I got a red line right here. But look at this one. If I go and say tutor j is equal to 3, it works just fine. So that means when you use a const, it's fixed. You cannot change it. You shouldn't change it. When you use a let or a var, you can change it as per your programming goes. So just remember that, because the things like const and stuff like that, eventually down the road, we will be building, APIs and things like that. We'll start using database and all that. In those scenarios, in any project, once you create a database, you don't change it every time. So that is like a const. The connection string to a database is a constant, so we don't change it. So such things, you will be using the const keyword, okay? But everything else will keep changing all the time. So those things, you'll either be using a var or a let. Okay, so let's keep going here. So I don't want to change the value of the const, which is Batman. But what I do want to do is I want to go ahead and show you how to assign different types of values. I did mention the basic types. You have integer, floating number, character, string, and Boolean. But before I type it though, I want to show you how I can use AI to help me out a little bit. And the reason why I'm including AI in every session is because you have to use AI now. You have to use it. Yeah, because I already talked about AI so much in the previous sessions. I'm not going to go into another discussion about AI, but I will go ahead and show you how I would use it. So let's go ahead and do that. So now there are a couple of things. A lot of AIs, some of the AIs are free, while some are not. Now I have both the free and the premium AI which I use for my work. So I'll show you both though. So now for the free one, I would highly recommend if you go to what is called as Copilot. Okay, so I'm using a browser called Edge. I don't know if you guys are using it. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. So I am using, yeah. So this is what I'm using, folks. I'm using what is called as Microsoft Edge, on the Windows, Mac also you can install it if you want. Now, what I like about Edge, I'm a Microsoft guy. I've mentioned that many times, like for example, I work on .NET all the time and stuff like that. So I use Edge, and if you open the Edge browser, on the top right corner, you have that nice tiny Copilot logo. Professor, are you able to see that, sir? Okay, so that's
Is it,
always there, guys. The Copilot
that's
logo is
an
always
artificial
there.
intelligence icon, isn't it?
That's right, Professor. This is the AI branding from Microsoft. They call it Copilot. So this is the one I use for the free stuff. I also have the paid stuff. I'll show that in a minute. So this is available for everybody. It's there on the Edge browser, built into it. On Windows also, I believe it's already built in. Somewhere here, there's a tiny logo. I may have turned it off or something, but I do use it on the Edge, Professor. Now, if you're not on Windows or if you're not on Edge, then you can simply go to Copilot, and there it is. Just search for the word Copilot, and that'll open the same AI in the Copilot box. So either you install the browser Edge or go to the Copilot website, whichever one you're comfortable with. Okay. This is what I use. Now, there are a lot of other AI brands out there, but this is the one I'm going to be using in my classes. Okay. This is option number one. Now, for the paid thing, what I do is I do have AI services provided by Upwork, where I'm a premium member. So let me show that as well, how that looks. So hold on, please. Let me bring it up on the screen. The reason why I'm showing you both is there is a difference on how these things work. So I want to show you both. So there you go. So you see on my screen now, this is the premium version that is given to me as part of my Upwork membership. So I want to give you like an example, what happens with the paid version and the free version. So let's give it a try here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to AI and I'm going to say, let me close this one. I just want to use the Edge browser option. So here I'm going to say, okay, give me a variable in JavaScript that stores a simple string. Now, this is called prompting. So you should know what to ask your AI. Okay, so it sounds simple right now, but when you're solving a complex problem, you should ask specific things. Otherwise, you won't get what you're looking for. So I'm just going to say, okay, all right. And then I'm going to send, and it's going to take a few seconds to respond. And there you go. See, I got the code there. And usually there'll be some explanations and stuff like that. So there you go. And now all you have to do is copy the code like this. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't work on the first attempt. I don't know if it's an issue with you, but it does happen to me. And then come back to VS Code, put it here, and then that's it. It is working. Now, if you want to go back and say, okay, I want to show this, what do? Go back to the AI and you can say, how do I show this variable in console log? And then the AI understands that you're trying to follow up. So this is called follow up querying. So there you go. See, now this is the key thing, my dear students. So when you're talking with AI, please understand that the today's AI, the AI that's available now, is conversational, which means it remembers what was done before. Now, this has been a game changer for me. Okay, I'm telling you from live experience. Just today morning, I was working for a client. We are trying to tackle a very complex algorithm, and simply by asking the questions, me and the client, we were able to solve a problem in less than 30 minutes. Okay, if AI wasn't there, it would have taken an entire day, I'm telling you. Okay, so that is the impact we're talking about. So go ahead and ask follow-up questions, ask for changes and everything, and get the solution you're looking for. Now copy this here and come back to VS Code and just put it here, and there you go. It's working. So in the classes, as and when I'm teaching you more advanced concepts, I'll also show you how to do the same thing with AI. Why is that? Because we are all using it. So those who are not using it, I'm sorry to say, will be left behind. So I don't want you to be left behind. Use the technology available. Now let's do the same thing with the premium service. See if there's any difference or something, right? So let's come back to this one here, and I'm going to say, give me a JavaScript code for creating a string variable. Okay, there we go. and it's
This
thinking,
will be
and there it
interesting
is.
to see if there's a difference.
Oh, right, yes, Professor. So I'm asking it for something very simple. So you may not notice it, but I can feel like when I'm working, like the paid one is obviously faster, and it seems to have more information. That's the difference I can talk about. So as we go more sessions, Professor, like for example, let's say I'm going to say, give me an implementation code for merge sort for a large array of 10, 100 elements, 100 numbers. And let me copy this here, and I ask this here, and I come back to the free version. Uh, there you go, Professor. This seems to come faster if you ask me. Like if I do the same thing with the free guy, he does take a few seconds. He does make me wait a bit. I don't know if you can see the difference, Professor, but I do see like the free one takes a while. Do you see that, Professor? It's still typing it out. It's still taking its own sweet time. It's a few seconds of difference, but as a professional, I can see the difference. you know? So there you go. And also another thing, Professor, is obviously the premium version, like it actually has an option where you can attach images. Like you can ask, say I'm trying to solve a complex problem. I can upload the image or sketch that I drew. I can ask the code to interpret it. So there are some additional features and stuff like that. So yeah, there you go, guys. So just remember this. Okay, so when you're working with AI, if you're not able to afford the premium version, no problem. There are many free services out there. I use Copilot, but at the same time, I already have a premium membership with my Upwork
So
thing where they are giving me premium service.
right here, I see that you're in Upwork. So
Yes,
are you?
Professor.
Is this actually being used within Upwork?
Mhm.
Wow.
So what happens, Professor, is as you know, Professor, I'm a long time upper freelancer. I did those entire sessions about freelancing. So I have a pro membership with these guys, which costs a fair amount of money. So as a bonus, since this AI started some 6 months ago, they started giving it. And then I realized I'm already paying for it here. I mean, I was already paying money to Microsoft for the AI services. And then I realized I'm paying here as well. So I canceled the Microsoft service and I started using this. Why should I pay twice? So there you go, Professor. That's what happened.
And you find that the one here within Upwork is just fine. It's good.
Professor, that's the thing though. They're all using the same backend. So in the back of it, they're all
Ah,
getting the information from the same thing. So this is coming from the same thing, and this is coming from the same thing. So it's like when you
it's like there's
buy.
a wholesale supplier that's selling to different retailers.
Yes, Professor. Both of them are using the same supplier, but obviously this is the free supplier. So, sometimes it comes in 5 seconds, sometimes it takes half a minute. There's no guarantee that it'll work all the time. Of course, it mostly works. I'm not trying to put it down or something, but the paid one always works because, you're paying for it.
Everybody, this is really valuable information.
And look at this, Professor. Like, imagine that I am taking a class on this one and I have to type it out. Now, that could take a while. Now, when you're working for a client, Professor, the client pays for the time you spend. So if I spent an hour typing this, then I will send a bill for 1 hour and the client has to pay. That's how business works. But now this is what is happening in all my sessions, Professor. Like the work that would take 5 hours, I'm now able to complete it in 3 hours. Now you might be thinking, okay, doesn't that mean I'm getting paid less? Not really,
No.
because I'm finishing work fast, asking a little bit extra money for that, and I'm either taking more work from the same client or taking on more clients and do more work. So what
Right.
I'm doing is all the routine, mundane things, which can kind of, wear you down. It can bring you down, Professor. So the
Right.
routine stuff, I let the AI do it, and I do the things which AI cannot do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you can even ask AI how to do a calculation for profit maximization if you can take less time doing these things.
That's right, Professor.
And it'll
So
tell it'll tell you exactly how much you should be charging per hour when you're doing these things
there,
faster.
yes, Professor, that's right. So there you go, guys. So I'll be now today. I'm spending a little bit extra time on the AI thing. Not in every session. I won't be spending so much time showing you this. From the future sessions, I'll quickly use AI, get what I want, and come out. But today, because the first time you're doing it, please, I'm telling you, go here. Now, next thing what I want to do is let's say I want to go ahead and try out Boolean values. So I'm going to say, give me the code for some Boolean variables in JavaScript.
But I do want to say also that like lawyers, sometimes a lawyer will make like 3 hours to prepare a document, but that document is so important for a corporation that they may charge
Yes, sir.
a huge amount of money for 3 hours of work because they know how important that one document is. So
Yes,
sometimes you
Professor.
have to value your work, not so much the time.
That's right, Professor. That is correct. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So here you go, guys. So I wanted to show you some Boolean variables, and there it is. So I was able to get some from the AI. Obviously, I can type it as well. So I can say let Superman is equal to false, and that works too. So if I want to create a string variable, I'm going to say let Wonder Woman, and I'm going to say equals she is a superhero. So there you go. That's how you go ahead and create a string variable. Now let's keep going. Let's create a character variable. I'm going to say let single character is equal to colon A and then semicolon. And for all of this, I want to have a console log. So I'm going to say console.log, and I'm
Now
just going to copy this.
remember everybody, this is a language. You learn the language and you learn how to write out the language and then you'll get the results. So you're just learning, you know, what these terms mean, how to use them, and then go with it.
So now, as you can see, I have different types of data types. I have created them. Some of it I have typed it by hand. Others I have gone ahead and used AI to create, and I'm able to show them using console.log. So now this is like a very your first exposure to coding, my dear students. Okay. Now there you go. Now I want to show you functions as well, but I only have
Okay.
10 minutes, so I'm gonna move.
Yeah,
Yes,
just
Professor.
to read back, when we started out saying that you wanted different packages for carrying things,
Yes, Professor.
and so just kind of summarize again, what package are you using here?
Right then. So here, when I talk about different packages like rocks and oil and water, hot water, cold water, now those are the different types of things I want to carry, I want to store. Now focus on the right side of the code here. So in this package, let's go all the way to the top. In this storage, in this packaging called Lambert Professor, I am storing integer type. Now again here, again, I have another package called tutor.j storage, and I'm again storing an integer value. Now let's go here. What I'm doing is this one, let's make it a double. So let me change this to 4.5. So I have a storage variable called Batman, and in that, I am storing a decimal number, Professor. And if we keep going here, I have a storage called is sunny, and I'm storing a true Boolean value. So that's what I meant, different types of values, Professor. Now, the interesting thing is we can use all those different types of data using the same command, which is either a let or var, which are similar. But if you want a const, then you use the const keyword. So ultimately, Professor, the left side remains the same. It changes depending on what value you put on the right side.
So what you're storing goes on the left side. What you're storing it in goes on the right side.
You got it the other way around. For that, this is exactly what I was talking about. So you type it from left to right.
Right.
But you read it from right to left. So if
I'm putting water in a bucket, how would you write that?
So the bucket, let me do that here, Professor. So I'm going to say the bucket comes on the left side.
Just so we can see where the water is and where the bucket is in this.
Yes, Professor. So I'm going to say let water bottle. So left side, the storage.
That's what you're
and
storing.
And the actual water comes on the right side.
You have a water you're storing in a water bottle.
Yes.
Okay, so you're putting the water bottle, that's what you're storing it into on the left. And what you're putting in that water bottle is called cold water, which is
that's the value. So that comes on the right side.
So it's not a Boolean. What kind of storage is that?
This is string. This is a string. So let's imagine for a minute that the water is a string.
So you're putting the string variable in
String value into a string variable.
into a string variable called water bottle.
Exactly. There you go, Professor. Now imagine we have a number like 10 liters of water. So that's going to be let water container
There you
is
go.
equal to 10. So imagine this is like 10
Like
liters of
what
water.
does that really mean, 10? You're putting 10 things into that water container?
Yes, Professor. So here as a programmer, you kind of have to make the assumption that, okay, 10 means 10 liters. So there's no way to say 10 liters in programming. So you tell yourself that, hey, you know
So
what?
you're kind of
This
giving it a
10,
size?
yeah, that's it. Yes. So you tell yourself that that is 10, and you tell yourself that, okay, that is not just 10, it actually is 10 liters of water, which is being stored in the water container.
So go up above and show us an example of one of those integers that you were starting with. You said at the top you were talking about
So here,
Lambert.
let's say I'm talking about, say, the number of shirts you own. So that could be 20. So I'm going to assume in my head that, okay, this is like Professor Lambert has 20 shirts. Now here I would say Jay has 15 shirts. That's one way of putting it. Now here I
Whatever
could
it is,
say,
shirts is just whatever it is that you're storing in there.
exactly, Professor. So the computer doesn't have the ability to infer the meaning. So ultimately, you give the meaning.
So are you setting a limit for how much you can store in there?
That's the thing, Professor. If you want to, you can set a limit, but as of now, there's no limit unless, I think the limit is like some 36 million, something, Professor. Some mathematical something is there, the highest number that a computer can store. But otherwise, usually there are no limits, Professor. Like if I want to, I can make this 20,000 and you can see it's working.
Now, can you actually show us a code of how you would use that tutor J variable? No, wait,
Yes, Professor.
variable is on the right.
Yes, Professor. I could do that. So I could
Okay.
do like a sentence which says, Professor Lambert has 20 shirts. I could do that. So let me do
Okay.
that. So
Okay.
I can do something like this. So I can go all the way to the bottom and I can do, now keep an eye on the bottom of the screen here, Professor. The output will come here. So I could do var output string 1 is equal to Professor Lambert has, hey, what happened to the, I think I called it Lambert Professor. Okay, so I'm going to change the spelling here. So I'm going to say Lambert. Okay, so Professor, now do you see now look at the bottom again. So I'm going to say, okay, there you go, sir. It says Professor Lambert has 40 shirts.
Ah, so
Now, if I go back to the top and change it to, say, 30 and come back, the output would have changed.
So you're able to grab that information and slip it into sentences, text.
Like, for example, Professor, like right now, when I log in the Zoom company, my login would be some number, like 12AQK, something. But when I come to you, it changes into J. So somewhere in the Zoom database, I am stored as 123AQ, JQ, whatever. But when I'm talking to you, it becomes J. So I'm being given a meaning based on the data.
And it's basically just doing an output string.
That's it, Professor. So normally,
based on the context.
Based on the context, yes, Professor. Like I can give it whatever meaning I want. Like if it's not about shirts, then I can say, let's say you own a lot of llamas, Professor, for some reason,
Okay.
Retirement farming or something. So I could change it to llamas, and the sentence becomes, for some reason, I mean, Professor Lambert has 30 llamas. I can even say something like, because of his retirement planning. There you go.
So looking at line 51, you have an output string, and that becomes
Yes.
that becomes that container which you're going to be putting something into.
Yes, sir. So now I'm
And-
using two containers. This is the container that has the number of llamas,
And you're putting that within the output string
uh,
container.
which is another container now. So it's a
Right.
container holding on to another container. And
And then
whenever I want to show something,
console log.
yes, professor, there you go. You're getting it now. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very
Hey,
simplistic, but
does everybody see how this language is coming together? Remember, ask questions. We have time for questions now.
yes, professor. So before I wrap up, professor, so I will be moving. I mean, I'll be doing the functions thing in the next session. But
Yeah.
before I go away, I would like this. I'll talk about the end, professor. But yes, question time. Yes, professor. Yeah. If there are any questions, I will take them now, professor. Yes.
Yes, questions. You can raise your hand. You can write your questions. Yeah, Sappho says, I'm a bit confused where we can apply this.
Right. So in the next session, professor, so we will get into functions, but I'll do something simple right away. So suppose for, let's say, this is like 1990 or something, and the very first thing we want to do is build a simple calculator. And the first step is we are trying to add two numbers. So let's say that's the big project. Somebody has hired us, and this is all new now, and we're just trying to add two numbers. So how would I do that? So two numbers means, let's think about this. So two numbers means I'm gonna need two boxes. So I know that. Let's assume for the sake of discussion that it's gonna be whole numbers. So fine, that's gonna be integer. And then I want to show the output. That's going to be the result. That's going to be another container. So I need three containers. So what I'll do here is I'll go back here. I'll go to my, let's say all the project is being built using my VS Code, the Coca extension. So here I'm going to say, okay, var first number is equal to 10 and var second number is equal to 20. And the big project is we just have to add these two numbers because we are building a simple calculator. So I'm going to say var result of addition is equal to first number plus second number. Finally, I'm going to say console.log adding first number plus second number equals result of addition. And there you go, professor. So now we just fix the spelling a little bit. Okay. And if I bring up the output, I see here that it shows me that adding 10 plus 20 is equal to 30. So if you are building a calculator, that's your output right there. And of course, that is a very simple application, professor. Now, obviously, anything we do in programming, you have to sit and write the code for it. So that is the whole point of learning these things. Variables is the first step. Then you learn how to use it functions. Then you learn operators. Then you learn loops. Then you use switch case statements. And once you learn all these things, that is when, after all the stuff is there, every session I have plans to build projects, websites and stuff like that. So there you go, professor. That is one simple example I can give on the first day of the training. Hopefully that answers that person's question. It's like when you first start, let's say, like when you're a child, professor, like you just learned how to walk. Now, where are you going to go? I don't know. But the first step is, maybe you step outside the house and come back, first step. And then later, as you grow older, you walk to the shop, you walk to the temple, you walk to your school, you walk to your college, and you start walking your life. But for now, you're going to walk from here to the front of the house. Professor, you're muted, professor.
What I would like to see at this point in time, which I don't think we would do, but to actually have the program ask you what numbers, what is first number, what is second number, and then it will add them.
Right. Right, Professor. We haven't reached that point yet.
Right, we
Professor.
haven't
So
reached
for
that
that,
point.
yes, sir.
Right now,
Yes,
we're
sir.
just
So right
giving
now,
data and it's processing the
right, sir.
data,
Yes.
but
So
it's not
for a
asking
few
us for
sessions
data
at
yet.
least, I'll have to give the value indirectly. But once everything is ready, what will happen, Professor, is we would actually have like a website, like a form where you enter the value, and then based on that value, you get a response. But although that is anticlimactic, we still have to wait a few sessions before we reach that stage. And I'll tell you why, Professor. Now, the problem is when we start focusing time on building things like input, showing buttons, boxes, and stuff like that, the focus of the session shifts from JavaScript to HTML and all those things, which is kind of out of scope right now. So normally in web development training, we always start with JavaScript. Once a person is comfortable with JavaScript, then we start adding what is called as the front end learning into the equation.
Right. Okay, so let's do a summary of the vocabulary before we go to the questions. We have the VAR.
Yes, Professor.
Which means you're creating a variable.
Yes, Professor.
We have the console.log, which means you're just outputting what the result is, basically, what the text is that you want. What other we did on one called let, L-E-T.
Yes, Professor. Let, yes, sir.
And what
and then const.
And const. And so what does let do?
Professor, var and let, they are identical in what they do. Var is from the olden days of JavaScript, like from the 80s and 90s and stuff like that. Let is something that was added recently in the last 10 years or so. They both do the same thing, but the difference is normally in programming, you should not be using the same name twice. The var, it doesn't check for it. Like you could have created a variable like we did right now, like Professor Lambert, and then after a while I was able to happily create the same thing once more, which just seems illogical if you ask me. But for some reason that was allowed by the older JavaScript where var is used. But the newer modern JavaScript, let, stops you from doing that. That is the big difference. Otherwise, var and let can be used interchangeably.
And what does the let mean? What does it do?
It creates variables, Professor. It does the exact same thing that var does, like what we did here. So every time you want to create a variable, like instead of saying var, I could change it to let, and there'll be no difference in the output.
There you go.
Oh, this is what you meant, Professor. Oh, I'm sorry, Professor, if I wasn't clear.
Yes.
So they both do the same thing, Professor. Like literally, I can go here and I can keep change every var into a let. It won't make a shred of difference.
So var is basically setting up a variable. Let also sets up a variable.
Yes, Professor. The difference is with var, you can use the same name again and again, which is not the right way of doing things. And imagine you already have a kid called Jack, and you have another child, and you call it Jack again. Can you imagine the confusion?
But if you try and do let with the same variable over and over again, it'll give you an error message.
That's right. So let's say I have a variable called tutor J2. Now imagine I come to the bottom and I try to say here, again, I'm going to say let tutor J2 is equal to 90 or something, and I get an error right away. You can't do that. Stop using the same name. I get an error right there. But if I go back to the top,
see everybody down below, it says has already been declared.
Yeah. Now, if I change it to var, though, the error goes away because var doesn't care that I'm using the same thing twice.
Would you have to enter it for that syntax error thing to go away?
This is the Lambert thing, Professor. I left it there on purpose. So let me change it back to
I hear you.
So there you go, Professor. See, now var doesn't care, but let actually cares. So technically speaking, let is the better option.
Yes, because it'll keep you honest.
That's right, Professor. But at the same time, this has been going on for 20, 25, 30 plus years now. So a lot of developers, including myself, depending on that moment, we might keep using var because I know as a developer, I will never use the same name twice anyway. So I know I won't do that. But you are a new student. I was born in the days of war, so I can't forget it now. But you are new, so you start your day by using let. So forget about war.
So this class has basically been setting up the variables.
That's right, professor. So
And
before I
as we
can,
move forward, you're going to be showing, okay, now what can we do with these variables? How can we manipulate them and use them?
yes, professor, like in the next session, we'll jump into how to use these variables in functions. Like, for example, we would apply it to build, in my head, I always start by teaching how to build a calculator, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and then a remainder, like after you divide, what is left behind. So I always use that to show functions. Now after this, there is something called operators, professor. So that's what I'm going to move on after functions, and after that I'm going to show about loops, and after that I'm going to show about conditional programming. And finally, when all the basics are covered, I'll move on to solving some basic algorithms. And once that is done, then we finally start building stuff. It's a long journey, professor. It is a long.
Yeah, but you're creating knowledge that has a lot of value. I mean,
Yes, professor, I believe
if
so.
people really learned this, you ultimately you're going to tell them how much money they can make, right?
Yeah, I use myself as an example, professor. As I mentioned in almost every session, I don't have a job. I haven't had a job in more than 12 years. This is all I do. I'm a freelancer myself, so I speak what I say. So
Yeah. And so you're able to make a living from this work. So that's basically saying you can make a living from this. You can make money from
yes,
this.
professor, it won't
Yes.
make you wealthy or anything, but at least I'm not poor anymore. That's what I can
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. That's what it comes down to.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Uh, yeah. So that's what I want to say. So I did all this 25 years ago, and things are all going okay for me. And you do this now, and it'll take care of you for the rest of your life. And the proof is in front of you.
Yes. And now we go to Jima Musa. There you go.
Yes,
We can hear you now.
good evening.
Good evening.
I just have some confusion here because now I want to know the use of the bar, lets, and the cons because now I'm seeing a little bit confusing.
Uh, like I said, folks, I don't have an answer for that, Professor. I figured we already answered it, unless I'm missing something obvious here.
Yeah, because now I'm seeing the bar and the lets and the cons is working together, but it's different. It's a little bit.
Yeah, I guess just what is the const?
The const is essentially a constant, professor, something that is not allowed
Constant.
to change. Like I have this Batman here, like for example here, professor, like I said you have 20 shirts, but then I came back to line number 13, I made it 30. Like I have an option to vary it because it's a variable. But I am saying that Batman is a constant and the value is 4.5. Now look at this. If I come here and I try to change Batman into say 6.5, it won't let me because it is a constant. You cannot modify it. However,
Do
you
you
see
get an
here,
error? Do you get an error down below?
there you go, professor. You have a
Oh, there it
big
is.
red line. Like here on the left side, you can see all of them are green. So that's allowed. But the moment I try to change the value of Batman, I'm getting a big red light which says, hey, you know what? You cannot modify it because it's a constant. Now, if I go back to line number 19 and change this to var, it goes away because it's no longer a constant. However, I do want it to be constant because I want to show you how constant works. So I'm going to go back and put it back as a constant, and the error is back again. So the idea here is simple, Musa. The idea is if you're using a value which you don't want to change, you will use const. But if the value is going to change, like for example, the number of shirts Professor Lambert has, you can use var, or you can use let to create the variable, because those things are expected to change over time. I hope that answers the question, Professor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right then. Because this
So-
is still a very small topic, Professor. There's only so much we can discuss about this, because
Right.
ultimately all we are doing is creating variables and assigning values. The more important stuff is built on top of this, if that makes sense.
So if we have variables which should not be changed, use const.
That's right,
Make it
Professor.
a
Yes.
constant. Like
Yes,
if you're
sir.
using
Yes, sir.
pi in your equations, you write down
Yes,
the
sir.
number for pi, and that's
There
a
you go,
constant.
Professor. Yeah, we know it's never going to change from 3.14. So you might
And
as
if
well
you're
make it a
using,
constant.
like pi r squared, right, is the radius of a circle. The radius could become a variable, but pi
Yes,
would be a
sir.
const.
That's right, Professor. Like we could do that right now, sir. So we know that the formula is, Professor, that is called the circumference, the area, right? So we know that the area is equal to pi r square. Yes, Professor?
Correct.
So what we could do is we will make, as you said, the pi as 3.14.
Yes.
That's a const, because we know that will never change.
Right.
And then I'm going to say var radius. It could be anything I want. Like I'm going to put it as 10. So now I want the area. So I'm going to say var area of the circle is equal to pi multiplied by radius again. And finally, I can say console.log, and I can say area of the circle, and I have the output right here. Hold on, why is it not coming? It stopped, Professor. Oh, the extension. Oh, sorry, Professor. The extension is stopped here because of this issue. Hold on, Professor. I got to comment it out. Yeah, there you go, Professor.
There we go.
The area is 314.
For a circle with a radius of 10, the area is 314 whatever units.
That's right, Professor. So if I want, I can make it a sentence. So I can go here and I can write another console.log, and I can say, okay, the area of a circle with is let's say centimeters. And you can see here, Professor, the output says the area of the circle with 10 radius. Hold on, Professor. Let me put that. 10 centimeter radius is 314 centimeter. There you go, sir.
So we're square centimeters.
Oh, square centimeter. I'm sorry, Professor. I'm not very good with geometry. You know, that kind of came out of nowhere. So I'm sorry about that.
But just so you know, just some people are thinking that should say square meters, square centimeters. Okay.
There you go, Professor.
So yeah, so you created the constant, you created the variable, and then you can go ahead and start manipulating those to create different results for that equation.
That's right, Professor. Now you gave me the math formula. So like for example, I really didn't know the formula. So you gave me, so I took the knowledge from you, and I know the programming knowledge. So I was able to quickly convert the mathematical formula into a programming formula, which is right here.
And ultimately, you're going to have an output page where all you have to do is enter the radius, and it will just give you the area of the circle.
That is right, Professor. That is correct. So ideally,
so would you call this back-end calculation or front-end calculation?
Yes, Professor. So right now we are skipping the entire front end for the first few sessions, because that introduces an element of complication which we can't have in the normal way of learning programming. So that's going to come.
The front end is going to be that web page that you go to, or an app that you create for the internet, for like Google Play Store, whatever. You create an app, and that's the front end where you just say, it just says, what is the radius of the circle? You enter a number, and it goes through this back end and produces the area of the circle.
That is right, Professor. That is correct. That is correct. Yes, sir. So in the programming journey, you know, the approved way of doing it is first we take care of JavaScript, and then once the JavaScript stuff is taken care of, then we start building the front end as well. So I'm following that procedure, Professor. I understand it'll be cooler if you have a front end as well, but what I've noticed is, and this is something you can check with other tutors, a lot of students get focused on the front end, and eventually we are still in adding two numbers 10 sessions later. I mean, yeah, I would love to spend 10 hours because I'm getting paid, but that's not going to make them good developers. And it's not useful for AIU either. So I got to go with what helps in the long term, Professor.
Exactly. So I think that little example shows everybody what const is, variable. Variable could have said let radius.
I can do
10.
that right now, Professor. So I can change it to let, and there won't be any difference in the output, as you just saw.
Yeah. But if you wanted, if you had to change the radius to a different number, would it let you right now?
Yes, sir. I can go here. I can change it to 10 to 20, or I can leave it as it is. I can go. I can literally come here, and if I want to, I can change it in the next line here. I can come back and say radius is equal to 30. And it would say if with a 30 centimeter radius, the area is 2826 square centimeters.
Got it. All right. Okay, do we have any more questions? I do not see any more questions. But I would suggest just going back, looking at this video again, going through it, looking at the steps, log in, practice, and start learning this language. And you can learn
Yes,
it pretty
Professor.
fast. Once you practice this a couple of, like for an hour, you'll go, okay, I understand now.
Right, Professor. So that is what I want to add before I finish from my end, Professor. Now, the one sheet document that I've sent, it gives the links for the full course. And we have talked about this before as well, Professor. The full course takes about 300 hours. So just try to keep that in your mind. And remember, that's 300 hours of learning and does not include practice time.
Also, would a student be able to go to Copilot and just say, give me the JavaScript code for for 2 pi r? No, pi r squared, I mean.
Yes, Professor. I mean, when you said I was going to do that, but then I figured, let me not use too much AI unless my students think I don't know anything. So I could say, give me the code for calculating the area.
You don't have to say JavaScript code?
Professor, because there are so many languages, I have to mention it. But again, because the AI knows that I've been using JavaScript lately, so it'll automatically assume that I'm using JavaScript as well. So it's clever enough to understand that. But Professor, like with my experience in old age, without thinking, I become specific. So I will without even consciously asking. I like to be specific, Professor. With AI, that's the key, Professor. Like everybody says they know how to use AI, but the key is, do you know what you're looking for? Isn't it?
Okay,
Isn't that how life works?
Let's see if you can recognize the Let's see if you can recognize the code that's produced here. Okay, we have a function, and it's going to return.
That's what I'm saying, Professor. Like, I was gonna do functions in the next session. Now you see, like, that's yeah.
But now here comes the example. Now we see the let radius equal 5, let area equal calculate area, which comes from the function. So you see where this is going. Now we have that console.log command in there where it says, in quotes, that's the text that it's going to produce. The area of the circle is, and then it gives the area. So in this code, it's going to explain the code. The calculate area function takes the radius of the circle as an argument. It uses the formula for the area of the circle. It's going to square the radius and all that. So you can see there it is. You have the let and the console.log. That's the code. So exactly what Jay was teaching here is what the AI produced for you. Now you can understand the code that AI produces.
Yes, Professor. So this is exactly what I was talking about, Professor. Like, like say a year ago, somebody would hire me to teach them programming. They were spending 5 or 6 hours a week with me. But now they only spend 2 or 3 hours with me because most of the time, the basic stuff they're able to learn on their own. And they only reach out to me for the advanced stuff. So which is a good thing and a bad thing. So now my work is becoming more challenging, but it also means I'm spending less time with a single client. But on the plus point, which just means that there are more people learning programming. So I'm still hopefully, able to make the same amount of money.
Yes, but our students are mainly adults and they're working, they have families, they are taking care of children, or sometimes, they have family members that are sick too, and they don't have a lot of time for these things. So to find ways for them to learn quicker is actually, it's more useful. We're going to have better success with the teaching.
That's what I'm thinking, Professor.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And that the ultimate goal is to have success with the knowledge. If it becomes hard to work with because of the time, people don't have the time. If it's hard to learn, we're not going to be successful in the long run.
That's right, Professor. That's right, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. I think people are just listening and gathering, trying to figure out what we're talking about, maybe, because there's no
Okay,
question.
okay.
I think Jima Musa, do you have another question?
I want to just know the definition of the JavaScript.
What was the second word? The depletion, I thought, or description?
Definition.
Can you write?
I didn't.
Can you write that word into chat?
Definition of the JavaScript.
I'm hearing depletion.
Professor, I got it. He's asking me what is JavaScript.
Yes.
Well, my answer is it's a programming language. That's what we are using to code. It's like, if you ask me what is English, then I wouldn't have an answer. English is what I'm using to talk to you. So similarly, JavaScript is the programming language we're using to build backend as well as front-end software.
But it's the most common language, right, for creating websites?
That's right, Professor. So I don't have a specific answer to it. It's a programming language. That's the best answer I can come up with. JavaScript is a programming language.
There are other languages like C++ and.
That's right, Professor. Yes, we have C#, we have C++, we have Java, but we are focusing on using what is called as Node.js development. So for Node.js development, we have to use JavaScript because that's what Node.js expects. That's the best answer I can come up with, Professor. I don't have a more
a
specific
I
answer for
this answer. I need only the short answer. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
And now we go to Hashim. Hashim, can you activate your microphone?
Yes, morning, evening.
Good evening.
All. Thanks, Professor and Mr. J. And actually, this is very tricky. And, I was thinking about the variables that we have used. And Mr. Vijay that has already projected and practiced. So, and, I was asking myself, after doing this, variables and entering all those programming languages, what will be the result, and where this, programming language that we have done, result will be shown. That's one. And the other thing, I think you have been using something called Coca. I don't know if the spelling is wrong. Maybe you can correct me, but I don't know actually. And is this a kind of setting that we're going to install to our computers? Then we can do that programming. So those are some of the questions that I have. Thank you.
Okay. So the answer to the first question is something we already discussed before. So to repeat myself, so please understand, guys, that what happened?
Oh, I just took this. I was going to share my screen. I was going to put a Google Play Store.
Oh, okay. So right now, guys, we are going to show the output in the bottom of the screen using console log. Now, what you are talking about is some sort of a website or something like that. We will build it, but I am seeing something that I see in a lot of students where they are unable to wait till training has progressed, where we actually build the front end. So you have to wait for the front end, though. It'll come at a later point of time. So till then,
Okay, so
the
I
only
just want to
place
show,
where we'll see things
if you look
is
at
on the
any of
website.
these, we're right now we're in Google Play Store and see all of these
Right,
apps.
Professor.
You see all of these apps right here in Google Play Store. All of these apps are built upon JavaScript. Would you agree, Jay?
Professor, again, just like with the other software, there are multiple ways to build apps. Some of them are built using JavaScript, Professor, but
Right.
they may have used C#, they may have used Java. But yes, Professor, some of the apps are, for example, all the apps from Facebook are built using JavaScript.
So if you want to create an app of
Right,
how
Professor.
to find restaurants in your country, right? You can go, if someone visits your country and they want to find a restaurant, they can look at your app and you'll be able to show them where restaurants are, where, you know, close to their hotel or something like that. And so let's go Crunchyroll, whatever this is, and we'll see.
I think it's a movie app, Professor.
The movie app. Well,
I think so. Yes,
some of these apps you can actually charge money. So everybody who wants this app will pay you some money to use the app. And so you can actually make money by creating these apps. And there's lots of apps that you can use. So think about it. You know, you can create a fun little app that's not very complicated, but no one else has created it. And you can actually make money off of that by making it for purchase on the internet. Or you can actually sell ads to it too, right? And just make money off of the ads.
A lot of these free apps are based on ad revenue, Professor, like especially like games and stuff, or YouTube, for example. You know, they are based off on ads. Very few. Some of them have a premium service, like big app, big ones like Netflix or something. But otherwise, majority of apps are mostly ad based, Professor. That's right. Yes, sir.
And it's really not that complicated when it comes down to it to create a simple app. You just get the idea, and it's not that hard. You can actually ask AI for the code and then kind of tweak it around a little bit, but you need to understand what Jay is teaching in order to know how to really tweak it for what you want. So
right, Professor. Like as I mentioned, sir, like even like ultimately it comes down to context. So unless you know what you're looking for, you wouldn't. I mean, the AI can give you answers, but ultimately it depends on what questions you ask.
yeah. So the question coming in here from Hashim was, what's this good for? Well, you can create a lot of apps to put up there on like Google Play Store, and there's an Apple Play Store, I think. And
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think Amazon has a Play Store too.
Right, sir.
And so you can go onto these places, put up your apps, and start making money. And you could actually be creating an app a week, right?
I'm more of a back-end developer, Professor. I don't have
Right.
a direct answer to that. But I would say some apps can be built in a week or so. But of course, Professor, in my own experience, let's say if you're building something like Instagram or something, it could take months or even years, Professor. It is, yes, sir.
But
it works both ways.
But there are ways to create things really fast that will make money.
That is right, Professor. Yes, sir. There are many apps, Professor. For example, if you heard about Minecraft, for example, that entire game was built by one guy. Yeah, he just built it alone, Professor. Eventually, like the Instagram, for example, it was built by 4 people. I mean, in the beginning. Like now, of course, they have hundreds of developers working on it. But in the beginning, the entire Instagram app was built by a small company with 4 employees.
Yes.
Ultimately, Professor, like just to give an example, sir, I don't know how much this would make sense to the students, but it's like if you're trying to build a house, and right now I'm just showing you how a brick looks. So if you ask me what is a brick used for, the ultimate goal is to build a house, but we are still making bricks. They're just one type of brick. So next, we're going to talk about the cement. We're going to talk about the painting. We're going to talk about the windows, the wooden doors, the foundation, the electric connection, the wiring.
And what I'm saying is maybe you just want to build a little house for a dog.
Yes, Professor. Yes.
And so you can learn how to put your bricks, but make something small that maybe
Yes,
has a
Professor.
lower price, but it still makes
Yes.
money. And then you can build from there as you make money off of dog houses.
Exactly, Professor. So if you're a construction worker, then, if you're limited resources, maybe you learn enough to build a doghouse.
Yeah.
Start selling dog houses, and eventually, over time, you learn how to build an entire house itself. So that's the best way. Like today, I'm still showing like how to take a brick and put it next to you. How to take another brick, put it next to you, but we are still very far away from even
Like
building a doghouse.
Creating Instagram is like building a 3-story building.
Yes, Professor. But as you said, Professor, if you're just building a simple house for kids or the dog or something, now that could be built in a week, but only after all the learning is complete. So whether you're building a big house or a dog house, the learning is still the same. It will still take you 300 plus hours to get
and
there.
Now they're starting to build houses with like Lego blocks. So you just get all these blocks and you build them, like you interconnect them like Lego blocks.
That's right, Professor. Now, that is where AI comes in. So some of the, like in the olden days, you may have to get everything on your own, but perhaps now, every now and then, you could take the AI's help to get ready-made stuff. But you're still in charge though, so you still have to put the effort necessary. You still need to learn even to use those ready-made bricks. Like if you don't know what to put where, no amount of Lego bricks is going to help you.
Yeah. So we want to see results.
Yes, Professor.
And so, okay, when do you plan to come back?
Professor, I believe I have the next session scheduled on the 13th, Professor. And that day I plan to jump into functions. I think the functions itself would take the entire session. And after that, I'm going to move on to operators. So there's a long list of topic, Professor. And I was thinking, since there are so many questions, I wasn't expecting that many questions. So I think next session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a road plan document, like where this is heading. I think that will give people a little bit more clarity. Because I wasn't expecting so much confusion, Professor, because in my head, I'm showing you how to build a brick. Eventually, that's going to evolve into a house, but it's a very long journey. But I didn't realize. But yeah, Professor, I will come up with a roadmap document. I'll put that right there in the front and center from now on, so people know which stage of the roadmap they are in. Like right now, we are still in the first stage, but a diagram probably would be a little bit more useful. I'll make a note of that, Professor. I'll make a pictorial thing. I think that will help. Yes, sir.
And then also add a slide for the commands that you're going to be teaching in that particular lesson.
I will, Professor. I will. Like today, we only had 3 commands, Professor, warlet and const. However, as you said, I'm going to maintain an ongoing document of not only that day's commands, but that one sheet document. It's going to keep growing, Professor. So I'm going to add all the things into that one sheet document that I'm sharing. Plus, I'll make a roadmap document, put on a slide so people know where we are. Like when you go to the zoo, Professor, I don't know if you know, like in India, every zoo has like these maps all over the zoo. Like as you're walking, it'll tell you like, okay, right now you're in front of the tiger. You just passed the elephant, and next you're gonna come up with the giraffe. So it gives you an idea, like especially for parents, like how much more walking they have to do, because the kids can walk all they want, but the parents they can't.
Yeah, we want your classes to be useful, so that when the students get the information, they can start using it right away.
Yes, Professor. I agree. Yes, sir.
All right, everybody. I think that's going to do it for today. Everybody, you can now unmute your microphones and say thank you and bye to Jay.
Thank you, Jay. And thank you,
Thank you, guys. Thank you.